Hi folks, my name is Eric. I'm the developer of Virtue's Heaven, which is a platforming game about fighting the end of history, destroying the Enlightenment, and saving the world in some kind of order of these things. The tagline still needs work, but right now is also a very good representation of the overall state the game is in, which I'm going to talk a little bit in this video. So yeah, this is the development update for this game, for the month of August. It took me a little bit to get around to making this video, mostly because things are kind of busy and rumbly and stressful right now, so it took me a while to get around. I'm currently in what I call Hell Week because I had to do a lot of kind of uncomfortable things that were fairly stressful. Most of them are done now, but it sure was the first few days of this week. Anyway, let's talk about the rest of the game and what I did last month, or what I wanted to do last month, what I actually did last month, and what I have to do this month, hopefully. So, it was actually kind of funny to look at this presentation, or last month's presentation, because honestly I forgot most of what I put down there. Again, another good representation of my struggles to have a very clear vision of where all of this is going, but I'm getting there. I hope I have to get there soon. Anyway, so the plans were to connect the last remaining elements of the first area, figure out the structure and feel for the next area, and start working towards replacing the temporary assets that were in Area 1 with more bespoke ones. Try to find ways to maybe get more money to put into this project, and don't fall into despair in face of the sheer impossibility of everything. Yeah, those were tasks that I had. Here's what I actually did. I mostly finished the first area minus the part where I replaced all of the assets. I have good plans built out for what I want the boss fights to be and what the thematic overlay is. There's even music done for the area as well. So it's mostly of the way there, and I'm fairly happy with it. But yeah, we'll talk maybe about the rest of it later. I was kind of forced, and you'll see that when I talk about what's on the plate for this month. I was kind of forced to make some more definitive decisions of what I want this game to be and what direction I want to take it. So I kind of did a lot of conceptual work. And not a lot of okay, this is now production work in that sense, but I think it helped me a ton in figuring out how to properly structure stuff. And I also did a ton of procrastinating because I didn't want to for example, build a boss fight, so I worked on the movement system again, which is my usual escape route when it's about, oh god, I have to work on this game, but I don't want to do the thing that I'm supposed to do today. So why don't I just fiddle around with the movement system for 2 days and maybe find something new and cooler to put in there? I changed part of the progression system once again, or not really the progression system, but more the upgrade system. And while I only occasionally fell into despair, which is actually kind of a good thing, because on a personal note, a few weeks ago I started the process of getting off of antidepressants, so it's yeah, that surely is a thing. So far it's going pretty well, and I don't really have experience any huge side effects. It's more okay, be mindful of yourself, be watchful of how you go through the day, how you think about stuff, and how you approach things, and start try not to get into any overall overly negative things. And it's been going kind of okay. It's still difficult, but oh well. The funding part still hasn't happened. I hope maybe that I can try working on that in October, November, and towards the end of the year, but we'll have to see about that. So when I talk about the overall direction and all that kind of stuff, so the reasons why I had to work on that is because Virtuous Heaven will be at EGX by the end of September. I think EGX, it's like in London from, I think, September 22nd to the 26th or something like that. I personally won't be there because of financial reasons. I would be able to barely afford it, but considering that like the costs currently are exploding, I decided to save my money instead and maybe get a new faucet for my kitchen, because it's like I'm still expecting it to break at any moment, but it hasn't so far. So that's one of the reasons, and the other obviously being COVID still being a thing, and I don't feel really comfortable like going to like a large convention and being in a closed off space, because, and like if I were to go there and not be close to my game and watch people play and all that kind of stuff, I might as well not go there. So I decided, okay, let's stay home. Thankfully, it's part of the Left Field collection there, which is like a very, very cool thing. And I encourage everyone who makes games to submit stuff there, because it doesn't cost you anything to submit there, and it doesn't cost, like, you don't have to be there to exhibit the game if you can't be there. But your game will still be shown. And yeah, so I won't be there, but the game will be there. And I was forced to make a decision in terms of like, okay, what actually am I showing there? Am I showing the area that I've built, or what? And as I was thinking about it, I was kind of like, and this is like something I've also been thinking about in regards to GB Roba every once in a while over the last few weeks, and GB Roba is like also like something I would like to kind of at least a little like go back to a little bit, or for a short while, but not right now. But I've been thinking about, okay, how do I explain what I've built here? Because there's like several layers to this, and this is like a convention setting where it's like very crowded, probably, and people don't have a lot of patience, and I'm not there to explain stuff. So I thought ideally I probably should build something like a tutorial area, like something where like people are being walked through how the game plays and how it controls and what you do, and then build like an additional thing where they're actually playing the game. I felt this is the most like sensible thing to do. But as I was building this stuff out and thinking about, okay, how do I explain this system and that part and that other part, I realized there were like a lot of things that took several like conditions attached to it. So, for example, the whatever, like system A, yeah, it works like that, but also if you do it like this, you can also do that, and then this, and then that, and it's like there's a lot of like complexity layered on top of on top of each other, where I've been caught thinking, like, how necessary is all of this? How important is all of this to like let people play the game and experience the game, and like how important it is for these systems to exist for what you want to communicate, what this game is about. And like for a lot of these things, and this is why I changed the upgrade or progression system a bit, I came to the decision that it's actually not that necessary, and like to some degree I simplified a ton of stuff. I weirdly also made some other parts maybe a bit more complicated, but I think more complicated in a cool way, or like, let's put it this way, the complexity kind of was boiled down a bit into like one or two parts instead of like being scattered all over the place. And I think this is still a good way to approach this. One other thing I realized this month is and this is again like just like stuff you learn when you're making a game, is I never built or like worked on a project that had that huge of a scope in terms of not only this is the amount of stuff that you need to build, but also this is how you have to like finding ways to make going through all the stuff that you've built interesting. Like for example, for something like GB Roba, which is, even if you're like taking your time you'll probably be done with it in like 2 to 4 hours, from what I've heard. If you're not having as much trouble with the difficulty, the game like GB Rover can be played in under an hour or under 30 minutes. So there isn't like a lot of stuff I need to do to string people along, so to say. And one problem that Witcher 7 had, like in terms of like how I structured is that I basically had this vague blob of, yeah, this is like the first half, and like, oh, towards the end I know what happens. But I had no idea what happened, or like what is supposed to happen in the first half of the game, or like in the opening bits, aside from very vague ideas of like what I want to gesture towards and what like I want this game to be about and all that kind of stuff. And I think in me trying to build a tutorial area and to build like something where I can say, okay, this hopefully will get people like an example of like, okay, this is like the kind of interaction you can expect, this is kind of the atmosphere you can expect, this is like the overall tone of the game that you can expect, and kind of like trying to build something in like in a small scale. I hopefully have like given myself, like, I realize that this is a need, this game needs that, and probably like if I think about it, maybe GB Robo also could have needed something like that, could have needed a bit more like narrative structure around like what you're doing. To some degree, I still had no idea what I would have done maybe, but like I think it wouldn't have it wouldn't have been like bad or anything, so it would probably benefit from it, let's put it that way. And so having like something that I can like, and this is also important for me, like having things and kind of like narrative or like larger like moments and story beats is also good for myself, because this way it's not, okay, I have to like build this gigantic pile of stuff and then I have like maybe a week of where I can build the actual cool stuff and then nothing. Because if you think about it, that's also what the game will be. A ton of stuff, then like 2 minutes of something that's kind of cool, and then yeah. So what I need to do instead is to make sure that like there are things throughout the game that are interesting for people to experience, and not just, oh, you just have to play it to the end and then it'll be cool. So that's like something I need to keep working on, and I need to be sure like when I build these next areas and the next like the whole structure of the game, that I have this in mind, and that it's not just about, yeah, just build a level, build the boss fights and be done with it, but build the stuff in such a way that like with narrative beats to some degree in mind, so that I can to some degree like string players along. String players along sounds kind of like manipulative or whatever, but it is about like, okay, there's like an interesting moment, which also like makes people think, ooh, I wonder what happens next. I wonder what happens to this character next. I wonder how where this story is going. I wonder where this thing is going. Instead of like, and that's like probably what most of my games so far are, like exercising in like pressing buttons, which is fine, but I'm also realizing that maybe that's not like what a lot of people are that much interested in. So there has to be something else. And also like this is like one of the reasons why Witcher 7 excites me so much, is because there's like internally, like for what I want this game to be, there's a ton of like stuff and like narrative things in there that I just like didn't really like work with so far, aside from like, yeah, it's kind of being like something like that and like very vague. Anyway, that's like, again, a lot of like conceptual stuff that doesn't really make that much sense when like people don't see it, what I mean by that. But I hope that the demo I'll have for EGX will show this in a better way. And so far what I basically have the area built out and all that kind of stuff. It's kind of there, and I kind of like it. But again, like still need to finish it and then look how it goes, and maybe I get some kind of feedback in some way. Who knows through which like ways I might get it, because I won't be there. I can't watch people play it, so I'll just have to hope that maybe someone tells me if something doesn't go well. But yeah, that's like kind of the whole thing, and this is why like everything, I put a lot of the game on hold once I realized, wait a second, I need to actually build something that I can show there. I can't just throw the like test version that I have out there and hope that it'll go well, because it won't. Because people won't have it. Will just be like a space where you can walk around and press buttons, which is fine. Like the pressing buttons part in this game is incredible. Like, just let me show you what I made this month in terms of like movement system stuff. Do you see this very cool uppercut you can chain out of your dash? Isn't that great? That's like something I did. So yeah, I built like this is kind of like the whole energy of what the game has. Like incredibly fast movement, like the ability to chain stuff into one another like infinitely. Like theoretically you can fly in this game if you know what like moves to chain into one another, and I'm okay with that. And again, it gives you the space to quickly improvise, to like pull off very cool maneuvers and to look really cool when you're doing it and all that kind of stuff, and it feels really nice and responsive to play. But there is also like a lot of other stuff there that needs to be done, because otherwise most people just like, you will play it for 5 minutes and think, oh yeah, the controls are nice, and then yeah, because you won't just you don't play. And even like I'm someone who really likes when like games just feel nice to play, and who like plays a lot of attention to that, and like has been paying a lot of attention to that way before I started making games on my own. But at the same time, there are a ton of games that I know of that I think, oh, those felt like really good to play, that I never touched after playing it for like maybe 20 minutes. And that were like much larger than that, because the rest of it wasn't interesting me all that much. So I have to like, in that regard, I have to make sure that like there's more to this, and I have more what I can show, like I have things planned that I can show or that I want to show, but it has to be there, and I have to think about that stuff as well. Also before I like really start like getting into the production stuff, or like it's something I have to pay as much attention to as like the overall level design and the upgrade system and the power-up system and all that other kind of stuff that I've thought of. So yeah, that's like something that I did. Another thing I did, and I'm kind of proud of that realization and like what I want to do with this, and what I'm just calling right now, don't be afraid to break your game. So the main upgrade system in Virtuous Heaven will be something called Convictions, and I think I talked about this in the last video as well, or like in the basically like playthrough I posted on this channel like last month. Is like, so convictions are something that you get from people that you free from prison, basically, or like from your friends, like in a like very broad sense, from non-player characters that you talk to and that are sympathetic to what you're doing. And so far these convictions, none of them were permanent, so you could like equip them, and you had like several slots. You start out with one slot, but the further you go through the game, the more slots you will unlock. And but in the old system, it was built in such a way that none of these convictions were actually doing something until you destroyed enough enemies or collected enough like resources, which I call zeal in this game, until they're powered up, and then their effect will come into play. And depending on where like they were equipped in your like slots, their effects would be stronger or weaker. Like the easiest example would be a conviction that increases your damage. Well, if you equip it in the first slot, it will increase it only by a small amount, but if you equip it in the last slot, it will increase it by a large amount. However, it will also take much longer for you to get to that point. So there's like a push and pull, and there's like also like other mechanics in place where you kind of need to spend your zeal to get something else. So it's always like like the idea was to have something where players have to like make decisions. Okay, which upgrades are more important to me? Why do I want to have the stronger effect and all that kind of stuff? That's kind of okay, but I kind of like realized at some point, I don't even really know how I came to that conclusion, but like where I ended up with now is that instead of like having this very strict on-off thing, convictions instead have a passive and an active state. The passive state is something that obviously is always there, and it's like something like a small benefit. For example, what you see here is like a conviction that has to deal with spikes. You get this from a bird who hates hostile architecture, and who teaches you and tells you like why spikes are terrible. You like the conviction in its passive state will decrease the damage that spikes do. For that I had to increase the damage that spikes do, because so far they only dealt 1 damage. Now they are basically lethal unless you have that conviction equipped, which then makes them almost lethal. And depending on where you, like if you have more slots, the passive effect will basically go to a point where they only do 1 damage to you or whatever. In its active state, and you can see it here, you just don't take any damage from spikes. And I thought about this, and you can make an argument for like, oh, this is too powerful, because people can just ignore everything that you've built. Well, the thing is, the movement system in this game is already so elaborate and like lets you do so much stuff that they can like ignore everything anyway. So it's not really, I'm not really like breaking stuff, because in some respect the game was already broken in that sense, and I'm not taking stuff away from the movement system, because that's the whole point of this game, and there's no reason to make it otherwise. And also, like, I've been thinking about this in the sense, there's, if I recall correctly, so there's a board game called Cosmic Encounter, which is like a game where you can pick different alien races and they fight amongst each other and stuff like that. And it's been years since I last played it. But one thing I really appreciated, and if you read like reviews of the game from a few years ago and maybe even now, one thing that like all of these reviews point out is that each alien race that you can pick from, and there's quite a lot, are broken in some way. Each of them kind of break what the game is about in different ways. Like, and another example I can think of that also like of a game that also does this really well and really leans into that part is Final Fantasy V, where the like at some point a few months ago I read a developer interview from that game where the developer said that they kind of realized they built some jobs in that game that were completely breaking it. Like they were completely breaking boss fights and all that kind of stuff, and they like realized, said to themselves, it's okay. Like there's so many different combinations of broken basically that people will find their own ways, and in that regard some parts of the game will be broken because people chose to make these aspects of the game more trivial for them. But since they are also limited in like what they can pick, they can't just completely, or like to some degree, completely upend the game. There are some jobs in Final Fantasy V that definitely are more broken than others, but all are to some degree broken. And like this is what I kind of want to like steer the conviction system in Virtuous Heaven towards. That sure, you can ignore spikes with an active conviction there, but if you have to choose between that and like a bunch of other things that make other parts of the game trivial in a similar way, then the choice gets much harder, and suddenly this part that you can see maybe is only like the conscious decision of like one person to do it in such a way. And then you have this whole aspect of like, okay, where do you equip this conviction? How much do you want to benefit from like certain passive effects versus like when they're active and all that kind of stuff. So there's like the potential for a lot of deaths here. There's also the potential for like me being just much more aggressive with level design, because if you have a thing that can just ignore spikes, turns out you can't put a lot more spikes everywhere, because there's the potential that people will just not be will not be affected by them. Still have to make sure that stuff will be traversable without it, but I can like make the margin of error much smaller, for example. This is like, a lot of this is like hypothetical, because the real place where this will be tested will be in the EGX demo, because this is like the convictions that players will get there. And I'll have to see how well this, like, how much I can see it. Again, I'm not there, but like, I hope like it'll work in the way I want it to. But that's like kind of like the overall direction I want to take this. To not be afraid of like things breaking the game that I'm building here, because it's like in this space where the really interesting stuff happens, I feel, in a lot of times, and I should not shy away from that. And yeah, that's like kind of why I'm at like with this part. I'm fairly confident that this will be the version that I'll go with, also because it's fairly simple to explain: active state, passive state, and then you do like a UI element where you're being told what each thing does. And maybe I even hide you can equip it in different slots, and then they'll be stronger or weaker, but I'll probably mention it somewhere. Who knows? The game is still very far out. But yeah, that's for me like these things are like the big things that I like, where I feel like, okay, I kind of made progress here. It's hard to gauge the progress here actually, because it's still very much like, okay, I'm on a treadmill and I can't seem to go forward, but I feel like I'm getting there. And I hope really with the demo, which brings me to what I will do this month, with the demo and like how we'll build this one, I will be in a state where I can like have much more confidence about what this game is and will be. One thing I'm also planning on doing once I finish the demo is actually to actively try and pitch this game to publishers. Not as much because I expect them to take it. I'm fairly certain that it won't be successful, but I want to have situations where I'm forced to explain what I'm doing and where I have to make kind of definitive decisions, like what this game is going to be. Because the problem really for me is, in a lot of ways and in a lot of time, is like when I have to deal with a giant like possibility space, I get lost. So I have to narrow down the possibility space. And for a project this large, I have to narrow it down now before I really start making things, because otherwise I start making things, and that's like the thing I think I also mentioned. Then I'm still once again in this cycle of chaos where like build things, realize, oh no, I want to make it differently, build things again, realize, oh no, I want to make it differently, and I need to have like a set of rules and a set of like principles and like limitations for myself that I say, okay, this is going to be the game, the levels will be structured in this way, this will be the way progression is gated, and this is the way like people will get upgrades, and these are the story beats that people will experience. I have to like, not like in a very like strict, okay, and this and this and this happens, but more like in a, if you come to a point where you like feel, oh, should I maybe change this, and I realize, no, this will break one of these principles that I set out, that I will just have to say, no, I won't do that. I will just like live with what I'm making right now, with this, what I have, whatever. So that's kind of like where I'm at. It's a bit of a weird thing. I sometimes feel like I announced this game way too early, but at the same time, again, with making these things more specific, with having more and more specific things where I have to make decisions and have to like present the game in some way. I had to like, when I announced the Steam page and I had to make a trailer, I had to like figure out, okay, what is it that I want to show? What is it that, even if like the like internal structure of the game or whatever will change, will still be somewhat true to like what I want this final game to be. And that forced me to make decisions about tone, about like presentation and all that kind of stuff. And the same goes for like, okay, having to make a demo. And in that regard, like being able to exhibit the game somewhere is incredibly helpful. It's also stressful because, oh my God, there's still so much work to do. And like, for example, one thing that's kind of like on the side here, the dialogue engine that I'm using for this game, it's like an external one that I bought because I didn't want to set up one myself. I wanted a system basically where like text is being handled through external files so that I could like potentially translate them and all that kind of stuff. And it works fine mostly, but sometimes it has this thing where like it just like locks the game up and creates a memory leak and nothing works and you have to like kill the whole process in Task Manager. And since it's not something I've built myself, I kind of have to reverse engineer to figure out where it's breaking, and I'm fairly close to, I think, figuring out where the problem is. But this is something I have to fix before EGX, because otherwise I can't show this game there. Because there are like 2 dialogues in the tutorial area where this happens fairly regularly, that I've found out through like me playing through it. And I have to fix this. So like there's a lot of stress, and I have to make sure that everything's ready and like not broken and all that kind of stuff, and that people will kind of like also strike a balance between telling people how to play the game without boring them, which is also something that can happen. Like nobody wants to play like 20 minutes of tutorial, then 2 minutes of like punching things, and then whoops, the demo's over. So I have to find a good balance there as well. So it'll be something. But I'll try my best. I'm pretty sure there will be something at EGX from me. So if you're in the area or if you're going there, please check out the game. It would be cool. And yeah, like the other task as always is don't fall into despair in the face of the sheer impossibility of everything. I'm trying my best as always. And anyway, if you like want to follow along, I haven't really been updating the Twitter as much in the past few like days or weeks because I've been busy with the demo and didn't really have like that much to show. Probably be sharing a bit more over there. Anyway, you can follow @Mokograd on Twitter, where like I'll post any updates in regards to the game and all that kind of stuff. You can support the game's development on Patreon, which will also give you access to like early versions of the game and like other stuff as soon as I have more space to like put it up there and all that kind of stuff. It's still a lot, very much work in progress. But yeah, if you want to support like my game's development or this game's development and all of my other development like adventures, you can do it there. You can subscribe to my YouTube channel if you really want to. Also, please wishlist Virtuous Heaven on Steam. Buy GB Roba. Please write a review for GB Roba if you haven't done that. I haven't mentioned that in a while, but that would be also cool. I plan on like going back to GB Roba and doing like some more work on it once the demo for Virtuous Heaven is done and I'm kind of confident, okay, this is what the game is going to be. Because there's like some stuff, there are 2 things for GB Roba that I would like to do. Like I would like to add like a bonus level to it, at least one, maybe even set up a system where I can add more. And well, once I do that, I also have to redo the whole Steamworks integration for the game because I updated GameMaker for a thing, and it like GameMaker in the meantime between like the last update that I used or the version that I used for GB Roba and the version that it's on now, or like they did this a few months ago, I think. They changed the way like GameMaker handles the Steamworks integration and completely broke the old system, which is great because again, updating GB Roba now means either having to roll back my version of GameMaker to an older version or just completely redoing the achievement tracking and all that kind of stuff, which is much more work than I would have to do if I want to update the game, but also I want to update the game and do some things with it, then maybe I don't get any more refunds where the people say the controls aren't working, even though they should be working. Anyway, it's going to be fun. It'll be a great time. I hope everyone here will have a good September. And we'll see you in October, I guess. I can see how all of this went. Hope you have a good time. Bye.